Paul was a 21-year-old young man living in a small village named Green Valley. Despite his youth, Paul had taken on great responsibility since losing both his parents at the age of 5. From that moment on, he became the backbone of his family, taking care of his older sister, who was preparing to get married, and his younger brother, who was still in school. Every day, Paul woke up very early, even before sunrise, to go to the wholesale market to buy fresh vegetables. He understood that the villagers always preferred clean and nutritious food, so he carefully selected the freshest and best vegetables. After buying the produce, Paul began his selling routine. From 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., he pushed his vegetable cart through the village streets, calling out as he went, "Fresh vegetables here! Freshly picked greens!" Everyone in the village recognized Paul's voice and trusted the quality of his produce because it was always fresh and clean. In the evenings, from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m., Paul set up his cart at a small market corner near his home, where many people stopped by after a day's work. Although there were other vegetable vendors, most people still chose to buy from Paul, not only because of the quality of his vegetables, but also because of his friendliness and sincerity. Paul's success as a vegetable vendor not only earned him the love of the villagers, but also drew the attention and jealousy of two other vendors, Mr. Smith and Mrs. Brown. They sold vegetables in the same market near Paul's home, but couldn't attract customers like he could. Even though their vegetables were cheaper, villagers still chose Paul because his produce was consistently fresh and his service warm and enthusiastic. Mr. Smith often grumbled whenever he saw Paul pushing his cart full of greens. Why do people still buy from him even though his prices are higher? Mrs. Brown would nod in agreement, feeling it was unfair that despite their hard work, no one paid them much attention. One day, the two decided to secretly follow Paul to find out his secret to attracting customers. They trailed him discreetly and observed his sales methods. They saw Paul always smiling, warmly chatting with customers, and carefully choosing the freshest bunches of vegetables for each person. He remembered their names, inquired about their families, and always listened attentively. Mr. Smith and Mrs. Brown tried to imitate Paul's attitude, attempting to be more friendly and calling out louder. But no matter what they did, they couldn't make the villagers abandon Paul. Sincerity can't be faked, and that was exactly what made them even more envious and began fueling a malicious intent toward Paul. Every day, as he pushed his vegetable cart through the village, Paul noticed an elderly woman who often came by to ask prices but never bought anything. She lived alone in a small house and seemed lonely and sad. One evening, after Paul had packed up his stall at the market, he saw her walking by again. This time he decided to approach her. "Ma'am, you stop by every day but never buy anything. Is there something holding you back?" Paul asked gently. The old woman looked at him with sad eyes and replied, "Your vegetables are the best in the village, but I live alone and have to beg daily. I can't afford to buy them, dear." Hearing that, Paul's heart sank. He immediately said, "From now on, come to my cart every evening before I pack up. I'll give you the leftover vegetables. I can't sell them the next day anyway, so please help me by taking them." At first, the old lady refused because she wasn't used to receiving things from strangers. But Paul's sincere heart eventually convinced her. From then on, the old woman, whose name was Mrs. Johnson, came every evening to receive a bag of fresh vegetables from Paul. Meanwhile, Mr. Smith and Mrs. Brown watched this unfold with cold eyes. They didn't understand why Paul would help a poor person, and their jealousy slowly transformed into a dangerous plan. Mr. Smith and Mrs. Brown grew increasingly angry seeing Paul not only sell his vegetables at a higher price, but also give them away for free to someone like Mrs. Johnson. Their envy turned into resentment. One gloomy evening, after Paul had finished selling and was pushing his cart home on an empty road, Mr. Smith and Mrs. Brown secretly followed him with bad intentions. When Paul was alone, they suddenly appeared and blocked his path. Mr. Smith growled, "Paul, you think you're so smart, huh? Selling at high prices and still being everyone's favorite, and now you're giving vegetables away for free?" Mrs. Brown added bitterly, "You've gotten too full of yourself. It's time someone taught you a lesson." Paul was stunned and scared. Though he had heard rumors of their jealousy, he never expected them to act so aggressively. "What do you want from me?" Paul tried to stay calm. Mr. Smith replied, "We want you to leave this village. We don't need competition like you anymore." Paul glanced around, but the road was deserted, and night was falling. Just as the situation was turning dangerous, Mrs. Johnson suddenly appeared. Seeing Paul being threatened, she panicked and shouted, "Help! Somebody help him!" Her shrill voice echoed through the quiet air, startling Mr. Smith and Mrs. Brown. Afraid of being caught, they fled, leaving Paul standing there, trembling with a mix of fear and relief. Paul stood frozen on the road, his heart pounding after the dangerous encounter. Mrs. Johnson rushed to his side, her eyes full of concern. "Are you all right, son?" she asked, her trembling hand on Paul's arm. He nodded, still shaken, and choked out, "Thank you, ma'am. If you hadn't come, I might have been in serious trouble." Mrs. Johnson gave a gentle smile, her kind eyes shimmering. "You were kind to me. How could I just stand by and do nothing?" They walked home together. Paul couldn't stop thinking. Mrs. Johnson was no longer a stranger. She was like family. When they reached his house, Paul stopped, turned to her and said, "Ma'am, would you like to live with me and my siblings? We have an extra room, and we'd love to have someone older to guide us." Mrs. Johnson looked surprised, her eyes filling with emotion. "But I don't want to be a burden to you." Paul quickly shook his head. "You're not a burden. You're already part of the family. We truly care about you." Finally, Mrs. Johnson agreed. When she entered the house, Paul introduced her to his sister Mary and his younger brother Michael. They welcomed her with curiosity and warmth. That evening, the whole family gathered around a simple yet loving meal. Paul felt his heart lighter and happier. Out of danger, he had found a new loved one, someone who he knew would forever be part of their lives. From the day Mrs. Johnson moved in with Paul and his siblings, the small house became warmer than ever. She quickly became an essential part of the family. With her gentleness and life experience, she brought peace and a sense of unity. Paul's sister Mary felt comforted having another mature woman around. As someone preparing for marriage, Mary often felt anxious about the wedding and future. During those times, Mrs. Johnson would listen and offer her valuable life advice. They often sat for hours in the kitchen, chatting while preparing dinner and discussing wedding plans. As for Michael, the youngest, he saw Mrs. Johnson as a real grandmother. He loved listening to her old stories about Green Valley, about kind-hearted people, and about lessons in goodness. Many evenings, Michael would sit by her side, his eyes bright with wonder. For Paul, Mrs. Johnson's presence was like a helping hand lifting the burdens he had silently carried for years. He no longer felt alone in being both brother and parental figure. With her sharing the household duties, Paul had more time to rest, sell more effectively, and take better care of his family. Each night, they gathered for dinner, sharing stories of their day and filling the house with laughter. Paul knew that since Mrs. Johnson joined them, their lives had not only become more complete, but more whole. Mrs. Johnson's arrival had breathed new life into Paul's small home. From being a stranger, she quickly became a beloved member of the family, bringing love, understanding, and precious life lessons. Mary felt deeply reassured having a wise woman nearby. During her wedding preparations, Mary was often anxious and overwhelmed, but Mrs. Johnson was always there, sharing her knowledge about marriage, family life, and helping Mary release her worries. The two would talk for hours beside the stove, cooking and decorating the house together. To Michael, Mrs. Johnson was like a gentle grandmother. He was fascinated by the folktales and old village memories she recounted. Through her stories, Michael learned empathy, kindness, and meaningful values. For Paul, he could clearly feel the weight on his shoulders being lifted. No longer bearing everything alone, he had more time to rest, focus on his business, and care for his siblings. Mrs. Johnson managed the house and created a warm, affectionate atmosphere. Every evening, the family sat down together, telling each other about their day, laughing heartily. Paul realized that from this moment on, his family was truly whole, not just because they had enough people, but because genuine love filled every corner of their home. One sunny afternoon, the family gathered in the small garden behind the house. The colorful flowers, chirping birds, and fresh air brought a deep sense of peace. Paul sat next to Mrs. Johnson, his eyes full of gratitude. He softly said, "I truly don't know how to thank you. Since you came, everything feels so much more peaceful." Mrs. Johnson smiled gently, her kind eyes shimmering with emotion. "Paul," she replied softly, "it's you and your siblings who gave me the most precious thing, a home. I thought my life would end in loneliness, but then I found a family." Paul was moved by her words. He realized that the small kindness he once gave, just a bag of vegetables each evening, had returned to him in the form of something far greater. Kindness, compassion, and the spirit of sharing had connected strangers into a real family. From then on, every day in their little house was filled with laughter, warm meals, and sincere care. Paul silently promised himself to always cherish what he had, not just the vegetable business or the small house, but the bonds of love, the people who stood by him no matter what life brought. In Paul's heart, there was no longer loneliness, only love spreading endlessly, the force that helped him overcome all of life's storms.